To prepare us a dwelling place there, in the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. We shall sing on that beautiful shore the melodious songs of the birds, and the spiritual sound of the Lord. Not a sign for the blessing and rest. In the sweet by and by, we shall be on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall be on that beautiful shore. To our bountiful Father above, we will offer beautiful praise for the glorious gift of God and the blessing and honor of His. And the sweet by and by, we shall be on that beautiful shore. By and by, we shall be on presence. Silliness need to get cut out. Dear Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father, we ask your grace and mercy to forgive us. That sometimes we just get having a lot of joy, more than we need at the wrong moment, and we just ask your forgiveness. And we thank you, Father, for the beautiful fellowship to be able to come together. We ask you, Lord, for your continued presence to be with us, that we would still have all this great fellowship and joy together, Lord. It is a blessing to fellowship among the brethren, and we're thankful for it. We ask you for your Holy Spirit to be with us as we go through this next lesson. Lord, I found this as for the Brazil classes to be just such a blessing of all the classes, that this one was a blessing filled with many answers in our work. And I just thank you for it. I thank you for the journey that you put us on to begin these ones back when you did in April and May. That we've been able to have the time that you've allowed us this time, Lord, that you sound an alarm in us, just like you will for the Levites, just like you will for the Nethinims, that it's you that's doing this work, not us. And we're just blessed, Lord, to be among this group. So as we go through this last presentation from the Brazil classes, I just pray that each one of us, Father, will have a greater understanding of our work as we continue to go forward, and the blessed work that you're doing for the Levites and the Nethinims. Lord, we praise you and we thank you, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Mm-hmm. I was good until
I know, I apologize.
Even in it, and I just can't.
I'm happy that now we know they sing along with us.
Once someone giggles, it gets me giggling, and then I can't. It
And
takes a minute for me to calm down.
It wasn't the singing from outside that was the problem at all. It was just the fact that there's the delays. So we were hearing it if we had the sound turned off, we wouldn't have heard it, but we were hearing it
Delayed.
off from us. And so it was joyful, and yet hey, it caught us off guard.
And see-
It was very joyful to know you're singing too.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I thought you guys just sit there and listen.
Yeah,
It's
so
good
it's
to know
beautiful.
who sings. Yeah.
But for whatever the reason, technology doesn't allow us to sing far and wide still together.
I know all of us on this end, we're sitting away. We're singing. We have our mics off, but we're singing out loud too.
Well, good for you.
5G will fix it all when it gets
5G
here.
will fix it all, she says. So it was beautiful.
Brother Jonathan says he even sings.
Yay.
So let me get our presentation up here. And we'll get set to go. I don't know if anybody watched this class already.
It was like a summary.
Yeah, the summary.
I just saw from the name what you wrote.
Yeah, I did post that in. That was last week whenever I finished doing the voice typing, I was like, wow, that was a blessing. I was so glad that I finished it and just went to sleep on that note. It was beautiful. So anyway, so it's not until we get towards the end. But this is the trimester summary and also called Protest of the Princes. And I didn't know the title. I got that it was a summary or a review or something like that, but I went and a lot of times I have to take the title and put it into Google Translate to figure out what it means. And so when I saw it after the fact that it was Protest of the Princes. Yep, it sure is. So we're going to learn who those princes are that are going to be protesting or are to be protesting. So, but anyways, as a review to go through, kind of like what Brother Victor did, just laid out a little bit differently, and different points being made. But this is the final class of the Brazil School of the Prophets, and we're going to do a little bit of review from where we came from. So we started with Acts 27, and after Acts 27, where did we go? And we're going to make it open for everybody to help us answer, even though the answers are here. Nobody wants to talk?
Was there a question?
At Acts, where do we go next after Acts 27?
You mean 273?
273. We saw that in Acts 27:37, verse 37, the number 273 is built into that verse. So we went to the number 273. Then we looked at the numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 3, that took us to the history of 273 BC. What histories did it take us to? It took us Daniel 8 and also Daniel 11 to the death of Alexander, which led to the history of Pyrrhus, the successor wars. What did we learn about Pyrrhus? And we found that Pyrrhus comes in two histories, an Alpha and Omega. That was Macedonia, and then his battles in Italy. And after that, and this was a lot of interaction with the class as well. So sometimes it's hard for me anyways, probably not for somebody else, but to try to navigate through that, putting it into a form. So, but anyway, so somebody brings up in the class Daniel 11:40, and the purpose for Daniel 11:40, if you remember right, was to show the two parts there, where you had the king of the north and the king of the south. There's a death, deadly wound, or a deadly wound, the death, and then a resurrection. And you see it in two parts. We also see Pyrrhus in two parts. So we saw Pyrrhus is Putin. Going from a different direction, Pyrrhus is Putin, and at the same time, we saw Pyrrhus is Putin. Who else did we see Putin was? So if Pyrrhus was Putin, who was Putin?
Oh, he was what's I
I
didn't hear her. What? What's
Stalin.
Yeah.
Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
So then we saw that Pyrrhus represents the king of the south, and in our time must also be in two histories. So the king of the south comes in two histories. Pyrrhus was the king of the south, he came in two histories. So in our history, the king of the south comes in two histories. And how did we make the first history Stalin? How did we make it World War II and not World War I or the Cold War? Anybody?
Wait, sorry, I wasn't following.
So how did we make How did we make the first history Stalin? This tested my memory too. So I'm going to try to do, even though the answers are in here, I'm going to try to get us all to test our memories. How did we make?
I want to try to figure it out without looking. How do we make, as opposed to what?
And you taught this somewhat, I remember too. So
That's fine.
just
Yeah,
to rub.
can you clarify the question? I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so Pyrrhus is Putin, Putin is Stalin. Then we saw Pyrrhus represents the king of the south, and in our time must also be in two histories. So the king of the south is going to be in two histories. How did we make the first history Stalin?
Because
And why didn't we make it? Why did we make it World War II? How and why not World War I or the Cold War?
Stalin was World War I.
I
He
can.
had the pact. He had a pact with Germany. There's that Germany alliance.
Isn't
Yeah,
it?
you guys are all got some good answers. Yes, Stalin was World War II, I think is what, yes, that does say, how did we make it World War II and not World War I or the Cold War? And how did we see those similarities? We could just, go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, sorry. I thought we just followed, this is what I thought happened, was that she just followed along the King of the South and then reviewed that history in World War II, and then it brought her back to World War I. But
Well, I had forgotten.
World War I was Lenin.
Right,
yeah, you're right.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I can't.
right. World War I was Lenin.
And the Cold War was Gorbachev.
Yes,
Well, Gorbachev for a little while, but it was what? There was a bunch of presidents in the Cold War because it went from 45 to 89, didn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a particular step, though, that she did to get from Putin to Stalin. From Putin to Stalin. How did she get from Putin to Stalin?
The 10 back.
The 10 back.
Yeah, I
The
remember
10
that.
back, okay.
Yeah.
We can just see it in history and see all these similarities, but there's another step in the middle. And that step, what we saw that Pyrrhus is Putin, but what were we comparing? We didn't really take Pyrrhus. What did we take and compare with Russia or the Soviet Union? We took the kings or leadership from a Pyrrhus and from Russia or the Soviet Union, and we compared them. We found that Pyrrhus equaled Putin, but if we went back 10 years in history of a Pyrrhus, it took us to the first king of a Pyrrhus or the king of the South. And if we went back 10 from Vladimir Putin, it took us to Stalin. We were able to see that Stalin represented the king of the South in the first history. And then we were able to line up Gorbachev and Yeltsin with Tsar Nicholas and Vladimir Lenin. We can draw the comparisons based on these histories, on the histories. Okay, did everybody follow that?
Yeah, I remember that. But at the same time, I don't think those questions were very fair.
Because I think it was just worded off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, sometimes it is hard to follow. But what she was asking is how, let's see, where was it? How did we make the first history? There's two histories of the King of the South. One is Putin. How did we make the first one Stalin? And she went back 10. She went to a Pyrrhus and went back 10. And then she went to the Putin and went back 10 kings. And those 10 kings took you to Stalin, took you to the beginning of the Soviet Union. The beginning of the King of the South. So this took us to World War II in the history of Stalin. Stalin was not king in the history of World War I or the significant portion of the Cold War. We could get to these histories through Daniel 11:40, where we can compare and contrast the two time of the ends, and we can see a resurrection of the King of the South. Then we can also see that modern Babylon comes in an Alpha and Omega history as well. The one subject that we haven't touched on is the study of Fatima. We've only referenced that history. I thought that was interesting as well, because one of the presentations, you guys are probably better at remembering things than I am lately, but one of the just recent ones that it might have been Mother Angelica, I can't remember. But where she's saying that, Jeff is saying that we don't focus on the Pope. And she brought up the fact that in Arkansas, and I do remember this specifically, the very first presentation she did was Fatima. And if anybody remembers, I did. What'd she close off? What was the last of those 12 presentations? It was 12 presentations, I think, right? What was the very last presentation? It's going back to the
Counterfeit.
counterfeit. So you've got Acts 27, took us to Acts 27, verse 37, took us to the 273. The 273 took us to Numbers, chapter 3, the making up of the Levites. Continuing to follow through to find the 273, looking at history, she found the history of the successor wars, the time between the death of Alexander and the four generals. Found that Pyrrhus came in two histories, an Alpha and Omega. You also had Daniel 11:40, where you can see these demonstrate these two histories as well, between the two time of the ends. So you have the history of these kings, where you have Pyrrhus, you have the kings of Epirus, you have Pyrrhus here, and I don't remember, maybe somebody remembers Adramyttius, is that his name? The first one? I can't remember his name. Adramyttius, the first king. But then we knew that we saw Putin as Pyrrhus, and went back 10 kings and came back to Stalin. And we'll save on that part. We're going to keep going forward. So we looked at World War II and Stalin, and what did we do after Stalin? We have two lines of Pyrrhus, two lines of the King of the South in our history, and what next? So you have these two histories right here. And if all you have to do is look at the picture, you're going to see what we did. So we had the two histories. What did we do after we got the two histories? Took the scissors and we cut them. Pyrrhus in World War II, we cut the line and we made it into four histories. So you had the four histories, two histories of Pyrrhus, two histories of the King of the South. The first two King of the South at the beginning, and these two King of the South at the end, an Alpha and Omega. After combining the lines, we were able to start making application. What were some of our applications?
That's a broad question, though. What do you mean?
Well, when you saw the four lines, what were some of our applications?
Like
like Ipsis and Heraclea, Ascalon.
All four battles.
I did not cheat. That came to my head, and yeah.
We saw four battles. So the application we saw is Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. And that's the simple version. There's all the other history surrounding those battles and the way that those battles are represented on the other two lines, where Heraclea becomes the invasion of Thessaly, for example. But we start making applications with these battles, and where does it take us? What do we learn by applying the battles? We discussed the mode of warfare, which is information war. We drew the line of information starting at 1989, making this line of information. Where did we get the mode of warfare from?
The elephants.
The elephants. And what did the elephants represent then?
The
a new
war.
mode of warfare.
A new mode of warfare. So it would tell us that we would have a new mode of warfare. And we know that our mode of warfare
compared to back in those wars where they used guns and all those other
right.
kind of things.
Elephants were a new mode of warfare.
Yeah, so we use internet.
So we discussed the mode of warfare. Huh?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I find it interesting. Maybe Tess has already mentioned this. Maybe everybody here has already seen it. And maybe I've seen it before too, but I don't remember. It's three steps of warfare. It's first the elephants, then bombs in World War II time period, and now it's our information warfare. Actually, maybe that's already been created, right?
I actually found a thing and I sent it to Tess and she thought it was timely, but they've broken up and classified the different types of warfare and information. I think I posted this in the WhatsApp group. We're in the 4th generation warfare that we're using right now.
So I think is the mode of warfare closest associated with that time period.
Yeah.
So information warfare is what is being used to fight between, especially in the last few elections, we've seen that all over the world.
Yeah, that's right. She said in the time of the Stone Age, they used stones. In the time of the Iron Age, they use iron weapons. And in our age, it's the information age.
Yes. So we drew the line of information starting at 1989, making this line of information down here, tracing the line there. Information on what platform? and I think we've already said it, cyber. It becomes a cyber war. She referenced it more as information war, because if we start looking at it as a cyber war, you start talking about different things that would be taking down infrastructure. And then we wind up building hot war back into this, and it's not the history that we're tracking. If we just say cyber war, people can build back into that hot war concept, because you can do a lot of damage by computers, taking down electricity grids and things like that. Why do we think that's not the case? By connecting our threads, we start at 1989, then 1991, going forward all through this history, making this a cyber war. It's not about taking down infrastructure. What they're fighting for is something completely different, which is information. So we were able to trace the information war, if anybody remembers those studies, and we've all been through multiple ones, but we did go through that. We went through also the dark web one as well. So after information war, where did we go to? Spent time discussing history. So we went through the Cold War, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the rising of Putin from 1999. So history was built into the message. What other applications did we make? What did we learn from this history? We saw the close relation that we have with the United States and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This came through Acts 27. Go ahead, somebody have something to say? No? Okay. This came through Acts 27, and it became a thread that we connected all the way through. Is somebody trying to say something? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think I can mute when I get the screen this way.
I think Sister Mary, when he has her on,
Hello.
Oh, she probably does have a question. She's just breaking in really bad.
Maybe if you can use your chat, because it's not coming in. And somebody watch the chat and bring it up if you could, because I
Okay,
can't
sorry.
see it on my screen. So we saw a close relation between the United States and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. When we were looking at the history in Acts 27, we found the history of the two ships. It became a thread that we connected all the way through, and became more important when we actually considered what was happening in the United States. So we have our ship, and it equals Adventism and the United States. So back to Acts 27, we found the ship, and we found it equals the SDA and the USA. And after we considered information war, where did we go next?
What do you mean? Where do we go next? Sorry.
Going through tracing through the path that we've been on in this study, the path that she was led on. We've all watched plenty of reviews. Hey, Brother Victor should have this down too. After he did that beautiful review. So next we started to look at the Sunday law. And I see that somebody did put something in the chat. If somebody wants
Yes.
to.
Sister Maroney asks, what is cold and hot war? Is hot physical?
Yes, Sister Marianne. Hot is physical, blood battle, guns, weapons, that type of stuff. And Cold War is without weapons, correct?
Information war,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
spheres of influence, I think, a Cold War, where it's not a physical war, it's more over spheres of influence. Is that right? Or
Well, I know with the Cold War, they just, that was when they didn't use any weapons during the Cold War, because they knew that if they did use their weapons, everyone would die.
It would be mal. What do you call that? What is the word she uses?
Mad.
Mad. Yeah. Mad. No, what is it?
Mutually assured
destruction.
but remember when USSR lost, they lost spheres of influence. That's when USSR broke up, and all those Eastern European countries that were all a part of Russia before, they lost them all, and they all became independent countries. So it was they lost the battle over spheres of influence in that one, didn't they?
Yes. Which is what which is really interesting when you look at where we're at today with what's going on with Ukraine, because you had Ukraine in 2014, and you have Ukraine now, and that Putin, and when you look at really what Trump did, this is what's so amazing to me, and I may not do it justice when I describe this, but when you look at what Trump did with this issue over Ukraine, and going against the intelligence, and whoever posted that quote about that, that they believe conspiracy theories, that these are from the Republican Intelligence Agency, okay, that are believing these conspiracy theories, that Ukraine is the one that it meddled in the election in 2016, but you give Putin, you were going to say something.
Yeah, if you want to see Russia and how its spheres of influence is Ukraine and how US and Russia fought over it, the Fiona Hill impeachment hearing was the one.
Yeah.
That her and the other guy went into it like, man, they said like, you don't understand what a big deal this is for Russia.
Yep.
For the sole reason of not letting Russia have this, we have to fight for Ukraine. Russia is our biggest enemy.
I think it made me understand things better than I had
for Ukraine,
all of this.
yeah.
Because when you go back to the end of World War II, somebody will have to help me out if I get some details wrong. You go back to the end of World War II, when they divided up the land, Stalin wanted, correct me if I'm wrong, part of that pact was Stalin got part of, that's what brought up the wall, correct? Is that correct? That's what brought up the wall eventually, was Stalin had his side in all these other territories. That's part of it, isn't it? But he was spreading communism. He was spreading communism, and when he got part of that land, because there was a treaty or whatever you want to call it in 1945 between
Germany at the end of the war.
What?
Sorry, I'm getting a lag. It sounded like no one was talking for a second there. Sorry.
We were trying.
Yeah, you do have a big lag. Go ahead.
I think he was just wondering about the lag, if why no one's talking. But I know what you're talking about, and I think that was a deal. Yeah, because that was the deal Stalin made with Hitler, was you get these countries in Europe, and I get these countries in Europe, and this percentage of them.
I was just saying that after World War II. So,
It was really choppy in what you just said. Can you repeat, Brother Jonathan?
At the end of the war, it was Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. And maybe somebody remembers the specifics better than I do, but the United States didn't.
Ukraine, which had like part of Romania, was taken by Russia.
So what the NATO was then put in place for was to keep communism back. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then all these nations and the European nations and the United States were all united to keep, and again, I might have details wrong, to keep the communism from spreading, to keep Stalin from being able to spread communism. So you come all the way to 1989, and he loses, Russia, Soviet Union loses all those territories, and they only have Russia. So what the King of the South's been wanting to do is get back his territory. So there's this battle to keep the free world free and keep back Stalin from spreading communism. So you come to 2014 and you have that issue with Ukraine, and now you fast forward to Trump saying that Russia, even though our own intelligence agency, and it has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Russia, well, maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but I think it's been proven, it wasn't in a court of law, it's been proven that Russia is the one that interfered, but Trump is insistent on the conspiracy theories that have been coming from Giuliani, it sounds like, and believing these things, and Giuliani is out promoting these things, and this is actually giving Putin, because if we're supposed to be supporting Ukraine in order to help fight the Russians to keep them from getting more power and more spheres of influence, Trump is giving away to Putin.
Yes.
And people in the world, or in this nation, do not understand what is going on in Ukraine. I, for one, had no idea either. And so Adriana's right that Fiona Hill, her particular testimony was powerful when she was saying, what you don't know what you're doing in allowing this. So here we are. 2014 was Ukraine, and 2019 is Ukraine. And we have a president of the United States who is seeking to get his own personal gain, and having a foreign nation go after and investigate his opponent over the safety of not just this nation, but of the free world.
Yeah, Sister Jackie said a different foreign policy at play.
Yes. So it's a lot bigger deal than I know that I ever realized to see what Trump is doing. It's not just about his getting himself reelected. It's the damage that he's causing to do it.
Yeah, because
and he doesn't care.
Ukraine, like, that is a heartbreaking thing what's happening to that country right there, because they elected this president, and since the Donbass, Russia came in and they had all those people died, and that whole fight against Russia swelled into this whole like fight against corruption in their own country, and they've been fighting to eradicate it all, and they chose a president who thought it would have that, and then this jerk from America comes and takes advantage of him and destroys everything that they were trying to do. And this guy sitting there like, well, I want my country to live and survive and get what it needs, help to fight this other dictator, but this dictator wants me to do this to get this dictator off my back, and I don't, like, that is a horrible position to put someone in.
Yeah.
It is so messed up.
All for his own personal gain.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's disgusting. I mean, she really pointed out how disgusting this whole situation is.
Yeah.
Hit her and that guy. And the other thing, all the witnesses that were coming in, they all said, by the way, I'm an immigrant and I work for the government. And they all seem to trust what a good little immigrant I've been. You know, everyone's pointing out this country let immigrants come in here. And look, we've become so amazing that you let us work for the government now in these high positions. So they've also been pointing out, you know, that prejudice against immigration and all the stuff Republicans have been doing. But
yeah,
she amazing. Anyways.
So we looked at the Sunday Law in 2014, and to do that, we traced the history of 2012 to 2016, and we compared and contrasted the internal plus the external. And in this history, we start to study Steve Bannon, Cambridge Analytica, and it begins to help us in our future studies, like when we start to consider 2014 as a midpoint. We looked at battles, and what two battles did we spend most of the time on breaking down? And before we try to answer that question, because we're going to go on to the class kind of went a different direction instead of into that answer, but think about it. When did we know about our Sunday Law? We were talking about this on the break, I think it was on the break. But we didn't know about our Sunday Law 2014 until well after the fact.
Like about 2018, right? 2017,
right.
2018.
And now the Levites are in their Sunday Law. We need to know what to say. So first we'll start with World War II. Like I said, the class kind of went a different direction than where she was trying to head, if anybody had that answer. So we're going to start with World War II. How are those battles portrayed in World War II? We could say we have these four battles, Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. And if we brought them into World War II history, what information does that give us? So if we have Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum, Heraclea, Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum in World War II, what did they give us? We take the battles from the history of Pyrrhus, and in World War II, this gives us a different set of information. And what information do we add based on World War II? World War II, I think I have somewhere along the lines an older slide that I slipped in here, but I didn't have room on the slides to do it all at once. There's an alliance between the King of the North and the King of the South, and we see that in World War II with the Pact. And we see that in the first battle, Ipsus, and we also see it in the invasion of Poland in the history of World War II. How many invasions do we speak about? There's one in the West, and then there's one in the East. So we have war on two fronts. So you have an alliance. We know we had an alliance at 2014. We have alliance then still at 2016, right? Then there's an invasion. I think the invasion is 2016, if I remember right. How many invasions do we speak about? Because there's war on two fronts. not just between the king of the north and the king of the south. At the same time or before then, there's first a war on the west, and on the west on the west, I think is what she said there. We spent some time looking at 2016 and 2018. These are our first two battles, Ipsus and Heraclea. We broke them down, and it took us providentially, but unfortunately, into politics. And we had to discuss Clinton, Trump, and what happened in 2016. And that still also amazes me about with FFA as well, with all the accusations that what were being political and making this all about politics. And it still amazes me, how could you come this far in this movement and not know that the message has to do with what's going on external from the church? It's going to involve politics if there's going to be a law. If you're going to go in just a basic understanding that there's going to be a law place, it's going to have something to do with politics. It has to.
Well, Brother Pipi just spoke about war, and he was, remember, talking about the atomic bomb and as being the new type of warfare. Remember?
Yeah, he
was
did.
Talking about all this stuff. So
Yeah, he did.
why is it not okay for the other side though?
Yeah. So we also, go ahead.
I think Jeff was referring to, because he's talked about it a bit, was referring more to the social issues that we're addressing more than like the world politics, because they're, even in their message now, they're still talking about world politics and Raffia and Pania and all these things. But it was the social issues that triggered them, because we were talking about things like racism and sexism and pants and CNN and Fox and all that stuff. And I think that's what triggered him to think that we became this political movement more than the talking about the external wars and stuff.
But that still deals with politics, right?
Yeah, still deals with politics.
No, I agree. I'm definitely not defending him, but I think that's when he said it, that's what they were referring to, because they've criticized us for having an opinion on social issues, and that's what caused them to talk.
It traces back to the differences between those political entities, between Clinton being a socialist and Trump being a conservative. So it does go all the way back into politics, which still wraps back around into equality and wearing pants. Women's wearing pants, because you go back to Clinton and she's a socialist. They believe that we're left-wing socialists now.
You know what I was thinking? That when Elder Jeff talks about half right and half wrong, that's his state of mentality. On that whole mindset of half right and half wrong is his mentality for like everything that the movement teaches. They're half wrong and they're half right. Like part of it is true, part of it is wrong. And that's how he sees things with the Fox News and the CNN. They both have things that they're right and they both have things that, that's wrong. And, it's really interesting how that affects his mindset on the half right and the half wrong really affected him, and even continuing with the movement. I mean, on top of other things.
Right.
But that mindset, when I thought about it, whoa, that mindset was a settlement for his thinking on a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think our perspective too, like I have this ongoing discussion, well, involuntary, a guy that's a regular Adventist friend of mine, and he's very much pro-Trump. And anytime I post anything on Facebook, he's right there, because he's got a political opinion, right? And our opinion isn't political, it's prophetic. And we need to always make sure that our opinion is distinguished by the fact that we're discussing a prophetic opinion. We're not getting tied into the partisan issues that are actually happening, because you can go back and forth for eternity if you're taking a partisan opinion. But when we're looking at these things prophetically, that's where our opinion comes from. And A.T. Jones was kind of the same thing when he argued. He didn't argue from a political perspective. Everything was very much prophetic and biblical, the angle that he was taking. And so I think that even though we do discuss these things, we're coming from a prophetic angle rather than a partisan or a political one.
Right. And the two streams have done the work on the various crops. Let's just put it that way. When you come to the priests, the Levites, and the Nethinims, the two streams they both fall, and we get to choose which stream are we going to listen to. So we also built into this study the two streams of information. How did we come to say that there are two streams of information? And what evidence do we have for the two streams? We saw a little bit of it in Acts 27 with there was a false prophet, and then we went deeper into the Battle of Ipsus in the typology of Antigonus and Demetrius. So when she talks about those first two battles, the first battle that we spent so much time on, the first two that we spent so much time on, one was Ipsus and one was Heraclea. So we saw two sides in the 2016 election, and we start to see that there's two very different stories being told. And what's really interesting to watch all the hearings last week, to watch what we're seeing is the fruit of these two streams. And one stream is promoting conspiracy theories. And I believe that when you watch Nunes up there acting as if the facts that were just spoken were not even spoken, they don't even exist. It's like that is the fruit of conspiracy theories. And so anybody and what's amazing is that the Lord gave us this blessing to open up our eyes to what the conspiracy theories were doing, and that was from the false stream of information and the people that did not let go of it. And what is the main thing that Elder Tess is saying from the beginning that FFA rejected? You rejected the two streams. And so where are they today? So we're seeing the fruit of what the danger of conspiracy theories in the external and the internal. In listening to Nunes and the things that he says.
Is that the one who kept saying, he kept repeating, like, well, what about the call? Like, he kept referring back to that they weren't there when the calls happened. Is that him? The one that was on the...
One of them was the lawyer,
the gray hair without the jacket?
No.
That's Jim Jordan. He's crazy.
Okay, yeah, he was
the minority. So the minority leader who sits right next to Adam Schiff on his left-hand side, that's Nunes.
Oh, okay. I have to look at that.
And then they had an attorney, and then that other guy, Jordan.
You'll see Nunes talk a lot because him and Adam Schiff both get 45-minute slots. But I thought that lawyer talked for a long time.
They give their time they share the time with the lawyer?
Yeah, because Nunes only had like a few questions for Fiona Hill and he's like, all right, I'm out of here. He just let the Republicans have nothing else. All they keep asking about is Biden and his son, and that's it. And
deflect. They all learned from Cohen, huh? Deflect. Just go out there and deny, deflect. And you know what? If you do it often enough, the supporters are just right along with you, and they just become to believe it. You tell a lie often enough, you become to believe it. And so they just keep doing that. But the Democrats, I thought they held their composure very well through it all.
Sure did.
They did. Adam Schiff, the way he wrangled it up, the first hearing, they were like, sir, an amendment, I have an amendment, and they kept trying to, interfere, and they don't do that anymore. He got him right in line there. But I'm like, there's a lot of people that are more for impeachment now, but there's people who just literally, if they're not watching the impeachment hearings, if they just watch Fox News and Trump, they think it's all nonsense what the Democrats are doing. And it's crazy because if you just watch those hearings, I mean, there's not any human being that can watch those and say Trump is innocent anymore. There's just no way.
And what's really interesting, because on the internal, how long have we been telling people you have to study it for yourself? You can't just jump in and catch a few highlights. You have to study it for yourself. So here you have like Trump supporters, my dad being one of them. I think he watched, I don't know how much he watched of the hearings, but he already just believes what Nunes says. It's all just a circus and a farce and a waste of time and a waste of money to do this. And it's just really sad. So anyway, so you've got these two streams that are dividing the United States, and everybody gets to choose because the fruit is coming off of this seed. The fruit is going to grow.
Yeah. Can I say something real quick on top of what you said about, your dad? Like my mom, because she was like flipping through the channels, and like on every channel she wanted to watch, they had the hearings going on. And I was like, that's important to watch. And then she says, they're just gonna keep them in there anyway. It's like, why watch that? And so I was like, well, Because there's nothing I can say to that. you
Yeah,
know?
and what Sister Adriana said, I think she said it this way, that the people that just go turn on the Fox News people they don't watch the hearings and they just go watch Fox News, they're not going to know anything because they didn't watch for themselves and they just took somebody else's word for it. And that somebody else's word for it believes in conspiracy theories, and that's what they're feeding the people.
And all Trump did was he took what Sondland said about the call and he said, President Trump said, I don't want anything, just give Ukraine what they want. He took that little snippet without all the context of all the garbage that was happening. And people are saying, well, he said it right there. He didn't want anything from Ukraine.
Mhm.
It's so maddening because they just need to watch.
They're listening to such a small piece of information and they're not actually exposing themselves to the overall story that's actually going on. So they kind of remain in that ignorance. It is frustrating, like just watching it and hearing him, and then people are just like waving their MAGA hats and their Trump flags or whatever, and it's like, it's just so annoying.
But you know what? Internally, that's exactly what's going on too. You've got the other side in this movement who doesn't listen to Tess and Parminder, and yet they're spitting out all these videos constantly about what Tess and Parminder are saying, and it's completely a flip to what they're saying. They're changing everything. They're not. I mean, it's just craziness what's coming out on the other side. It's exactly the same issue, and then their followers believe that, because they don't listen to Tess and Parminder either, so they believe all the garbage.
It's like
Same thing.
chain.
But
It's like, whoa.
They're not even agreeing with each other.
They
on
chose who they're
issues.
going to follow based on rights issues, though. Because they don't care what Trump does wrong because he does the right thing on the race issues of immigration. He puts, the people they don't like where they, don't have to deal with them. And our movement, no one accepted the equality message. And so they went back to Jeff and his conspiracy theories. So it all stems back from the test of equality. If you want to discriminate, then your leader is going to be a dictator. That's what you're going to have to listen to.
And so now externally you have two streams. Internally you have two mountains, a mountain with a good message and a mountain with a bad message. And people are going to have to choose. What's going to help them to be their deciding factor when there's two mountains giving a message, one good, one bad?
I don't know. Is it two mountains? I thought it was a mountain and a stone. Because is there more?
From what I was listening to this morning when he's bringing up Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, the Mount of blessing and the Mount of cursing. So
yeah, but temples. There are two temples on those mountains, and they're both bad mountains anyway because of the temple.
Right.
It's our mountain, like Mount Zion's not a good mountain either, he said, because the Jews put a temple on it, and Garrison is a bad mountain too because the Sanhedrins put a temple on it. Samaritans, sorry.
So if you're going to have a true and a false stream within, what's going to be the deciding factor? Whatever you want to label that whatever we label that symbolically that stream is, there's a good stream and a bad stream, right? What's going to be the deciding factor? We're going to go out there with the truth, but if they're all darkened by all these things, what's going to be the deciding factor?
Well, it seems like we have two groups, and I know my initial feeling was that group was going to eventually fade away after November 9th. I thought that a while ago, and obviously that doesn't make any sense. When we go to bring our message, they're also going to be bringing a message. Right? And so the people who are going to have to decide, the people that we're going to, they're all being plowed for the most part on external events, particularly the world only on external events. The choice that they make between these two groups is going to be dependent on the decisions that they're making right now. So it's like the fruit is going to be the deciding factor.
Yeah, they're not gonna, because we just come in their harvest time. The majority of the work is already done and they made their choice. We just connect them to who originated that message in the first place, that it was God, it seems. Because what else do we give them? They know the equality, they know everything. They already had their former and their latter reign. They're in their harvest time now. That's when we come into contact with them physically.
And if we're going as two groups into the church, to make a really rough breakdown, I know it's not exactly this, but the conservatives will be drawn to their message and the liberals will be drawn to this message.
But what are we going to be representing?
Equality.
Yeah, that too. But there's
Embodiment of Christ in our time is equality.
what are they going to? Yes, what are they going to see? There's something else I'm looking for. What are they going to see in us?
Christ in us,
Testimony.
There,
which
both,
is
the living
that's
testimony.
the tangibly though. That's the equality message.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're going to see the living testimony and everything that it embodies. They're going to see the living testimony, and that is going to be the witness to the world, and that's what causes the people to come to those people in Zechariah 8, that they know that God is with them. They're going to see that. They're going to see that. So yes, equality. I wasn't trying to take away that at all. It's part of it. So we saw the two applications in the Battle of Ipsus. One was Antigonus and Demetrius against the three allies, and the other was Seleucus and Antigonus. They both have an important ally. Who is it in the first history? In the first history, the ally was Pyrrhus. We know that Pyrrhus was Demetrius's general. And the second was Ptolemy. So we see in the first Battle of Ipsus, there's an alliance with the king of the south. So here's one of the older slides that I brought up, the two perspectives of Ipsus. The first one that we studied, where Antigonus is Clinton, and you have Demetrius as the king of the north, Trump, and Pyrrhus as the king of the south, or Putin, against the three allies, Seleucus, Lysimachus, or Cassander, or Trump and Putin, versus the executive, judicial, legislative branch of Clinton and Trump vying for these three powers. And Putin is helping Trump. The second perspective, I'm not as recalling my mind too well. I can tell this story as well. If somebody else wants to review it, they can. Was with Seleucus as Trump and Ptolemy as Putin versus Antigonus. Can you remember it enough to say it?
Which one?
The second perspective. I know it was what was going on while the Battle of Ipsus was going on. While the Battle of Ipsus was happening, this was another part of what was going on at the same time.
Yeah. Well, you had. This was right after Ipsus, or this was during Ipsus?
It was
no.
the other perspective of Ipsus. So it was happening. It was a part of Ipsus.
Oh yeah, this is
Where
where
Ptolemy was helping Seleucus. And I don't remember, I know it had to do with Egypt and the land of Egypt, or the land of Syria, Anybody remember it better?
Ptolemy left
I
the
was
battle.
remembering
He
it.
didn't go to Ipsus because there
And
was.
this is what was happening while he wasn't at the battle.
Yeah. So there was some kind of insurgency going on, and I think in the Syria area.
Yes, Syria.
And he had to go there, and Seleucus was in Ipsus. He was fighting Ipsus too, wasn't he? Or this was right before, because Seleucus ended up arriving at Ipsus at the last minute, and he swayed the battle. But so maybe this was before. I don't remember it well enough though.
It was when we were on, I know we did this one in Portola. And
Yeah.
I don't remember it well enough either. But if I remember, what I do remember is that I think, and I might be wrong, that the Battle of Ipsus was the part that gave us the very initial beginning of the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, between Ptolemy and Antigonus, that where the initial battle started and all the way through history. And it had to do with, I want to say it was that area in Syria, where one of them got it, had the land. Ptolemy went in and took it, I thought. Ptolemy went in and took it, and Antigonus never really fought him about it.
Oh, no.
You remember it?
Seleucus. So
Okay.
Seleucus, it was that area of land was taken from Antigonus, and it was Seleucus's area.
Okay.
It was Seleucus's, but Seleucus was off fighting Antigonus in the battle, and so Ptolemy got it, so Ptolemy had that area. Ptolemy had the area of Coelesyria. He conquered it. He took it. In the battle, the three won against Antigonus, and they split up the area of Antigonus amongst themselves, and they gave Seleucus that area of Coelesyria. And Ptolemy couldn't say anything because they were allies, so he just left it. So Seleucus took it because it was his winnings out of the battle with Antigonus. That's what it was. And so it was just left like that. And then it was their
And because
sons that
something to
were.
do with they were friends and they just left it that way. But
It's
it
because
was-
they were
yes.
allies. They were in the
Yeah.
same league
Yeah.
and they were allies and he couldn't say anything.
And so later on, it was the ancestors, actually, the sons that
Yeah.
fought. And the whole battle over Coal Syria has continued to this day. The king of the north and the king of the south.
Okay. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Okay, so I've been watching Germany, and she explains this a little better in the Germany presentation. And so it's a little different.
Do you mean World War I version of it? Because that one's a different thing.
Right, but Antigonus and Seleucus was actually allies.
That's World War I. That's a different application, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
Well,
that
I'm-
is World War I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, but by this time Antigonus was already dead. By Ipsus, I think Antigonus was already dead, right?
Antigonus died at the Battle of Ipsus, but the one where Seleucus and Antigonus was allies was in the Second Diadochi War, before the
Right.
third, or the fourth.
For
That's-
World War One.
Yeah.
Yeah, World
Right.
War.
So, but what I was saying is, by this time, by 3-1 Ipsus, Antigonus had already been defeated.
He was defeated in Ipsus.
At the Battle of Ipsus. By the
Okay.
elephants. By the elephants. Okay.
By the elephant, yeah.
So this does not touch on World War I because at this time, when these studies were done, World War I had not opened up yet. So just a quick review where you have the line of Pyrrhus here. You have Ipsus at 301. You have, this was Cassander was placed. Who placed Cassander as a dictator? I can't remember if somebody remembers. Cassander was placed as a dictator in Athens. 10 years later, Demetrius liberates Athens, and that marks the time of the end. It was the breaking of the peace treaty in the Fourth Diadochi War.
Was it Cassander? I thought Cassander placed a puppet in Athens.
Maybe he did. So
Yeah, and then
he wasn't
Demetrius-
the puppet?
No,
Okay.
Demetrius went and killed Cassander's puppet.
Okay.
I'm
So
pretty sure that's what it was.
I only have Cassander, and I thought I think you're right because I vaguely remember it saying Cassander placed a dictator there. So Demetrius liberates Athens from the dictator that Cassander placed there. And then in 303, you have Pyrrhus and Demetrius in alliance. You have this period of 10 years in each one of these. This is coming up on World War II. Prior to, you have the Spanish Civil War. We went through that history quite a bit. But you have that 10-year period. Then you also have, in our history, you have 1979 to 1989, the period of 10 year here, the proxy war, and you have the Afghan War. So then you have the time of the ends all lined up. Then you have the alliance that they're in lining up with 2014, Putin and Trump in alliance, Hitler and Stalin in alliance, and then Pyrrhus and Demetrius. Then you have Ipsus, and that's the invasion of Poland. And they're still in this alliance, and they're helping one another here. Enemies, but yet helping one another, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the beginning of war on the Western Front, the beginning of World War II. 2016 is the election, beginning of war on the Western Front. Putin and Trump in alliance here to go against the three allies, the executive, judicial, and legislative branch. And then future would be the Eastern Front. That's just I threw that in there just to try to help us look back at what it was. I also put in Heraclea just because after discussing those battles, we lined up Heraclea. So we looked at Ipsus, then we went into Heraclea and saw how that was fulfilled last year. So this was the Battle of Heraclea, where you had first the executive order that was it had to do with the national cyber strategy, I believe, where he put that executive order, which I always thought was interesting, is how he says that Russia did not interfere with the election, but yet he specifies the reason for this executive order in the national cyber strategy that later was put into effect was specifically Russia's listed first, and then I don't remember the other order, but China, Korea, what am I missing? China, Korea, and,
Turkey. Turkey was one.
Was Turkey one
Was
of them?
it Turkey or Iran?
I don't think
Iran.
it was Turkey. Iran. Thank you, Iran. So,
And another one.
So no, there was 4. I remember there being 4 that
Yeah,
were listed.
Russia, Iran,
China,
China, and North Korea. Yeah,
and
yeah.
North Korea. So for someone saying that Russia did not interfere with the election, why is he writing this executive order and signing it to bring up this national cyber strategy to prevent specifically any election interference, naming Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China?
Yeah, and no Ukraine or CrowdStrike.
And nobody seems to pay attention to that stuff. So that was the executive order was May of 2017, and that's not considered part of Heraclea, but that's what brought in place all the rest of this that did happen in 2018. 2018, you have the Helsinki meeting where Trump and Putin meet. Trump, right up in front of everybody, says that he believes Putin over his own intelligence agency, that Russia did not interfere with the election. But at the same time he's saying Russia didn't interfere with the election, he's got this executive order that he's put in place. September 21st, the National Cyber Strategy, they're now saying that they are going to use this tool offensively, where we would have normally done defensively, used it as a defense. We're now going to be offensive with it to prevent interference with the election. And we're coming up here as well. This is September. We're coming up here for the elections that are coming up. Putin then says that to Bolton, I think it was, where I don't understand this. Why is Trump not acting? He was first friendly in Helsinki, and why is he not being friendly with me now? Because he's taking these offensive actions. So on October 31st, they're saying that they're announcing we're taking offensive action right now. November 6th is the midterm elections. And so they were blocked from being able to. This is also when he put out, I believe, the Internet Research Agency was part of all this too, when that was put out, for those that looked at the Internet Research Agency done by Russia. So they blocked it from being able to interfere with elections. Again, why don't people just think? You know, it's really interesting, because when I started reading the Bible, I thought, wow, why don't people just think? Why don't people just, if we just stopped and thought about things. So if you just stop and think about, he's saying one thing, that Russia didn't interfere with the election, but he's putting all these systems in place to block Russia from being able to interfere with the elections. We don't have our ability to think anymore. So then November 9.
And aren't those November elections the one that brought in the freshmen right now,
Yes.
like AOC,
Yes.
Katie Porter, and all of
Yes.
these? Yeah.
Yes.
Which are now restraining Trump.
Right.
Very incredible time.
Right. So then you have November 9, I believe that's the G20 in Argentina, where he's supposed to have a meeting with Putin, and he cancels it. But we do know that he had a secret meeting, or maybe that was, I don't know if that was November 29 or not. It might have been November 29. There's a meeting canceled. I don't remember CISA. Maybe Adriana remembers CISA. Or somebody else maybe remembers that one.
That's the one where they can attack.
Where they can attack in Ukraine and Russia.
They don't just defend themselves against cyber attack. They can go on the offensive. Isn't that what that CISA was?
If it was part of the original, the National Cyber Strategy, it stood for something else. I didn't put it in here.
I don't remember what it stood for, but the National Cyber Strategy was to keep people out of our elections. But the CISA was like an offensive. Like, we're not just going to protect anymore. We're going to actively, like.
Yeah, well, that was in September 21 where they would act defensively.
Was it?
Yeah, yeah. I don't have those notes
Oh,
here.
CISA was attached to the Homeland Security Department. They were
That's the job my brother had for 32 years. DISA.
And do you remember the November 25th, Russia-Ukraine? That's the boats that went in without permission. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that started the whole incident there?
Yeah, because they were in a state of emergency in Ukraine, and at any minute they thought that Russia was going to declare war against Ukraine, or Ukraine would, I don't know what they were going to do. And that's what Trump used as an excuse not to go to that next meeting.
CISA stands for Certified Information Systems Auditor, right? Is that?
Yeah.
No.
The same one? Or no?
No.
Oh.
This is it's right here.
Just put November 16.
Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. So, and then you have November 29th, he cancels the meeting. So November 29th might have been the Argentina one. I'm not real sure. But he cancels the meeting. And then he also, right after that, he announces the troops are withdrawing from, so whatever, I think November 29th was the secret meeting that he had in Argentina. The one where he had the translator, took the notes from the translator, and also told the translator they're not to speak about this to anybody.
Yeah.
So, so he does that. He has this secret meeting, and then right after that secret meeting, he comes out, and that's when he announces the troops are withdrawing from Syria and Afghanistan, which I think it was half the troops from Afghanistan, and that prompted Jim Mattis's resignation. He had it, I guess you want to say. I guess that would be the way to say it. And then he also removed sanctions on Oleg Deripaska.
Did Trump withdraw troops from Afghanistan immediately in December?
No, in this particular here, and maybe somebody remembers the details again, because this had to do with what he heard from Fox News. Fox News, everybody was in an uproar, and including his fan base, whatever you want to call it, his support base over his withdrawing the troops. So he wound up being criticized by Fox News, his favorites, and did not do the withdrawal at that time. But then he later went back and did the withdrawal.
So when did the troops withdraw out of Afghanistan?
At that time, I don't think that they did.
No, I'm asking, does anyone know when? Because I'm still having the issue where we're using that particular event for both Rafia and 2018 as a victory for Russia. But if there's two different troop pullouts, then maybe I was thinking that if he pulled out of Afghanistan immediately, that would count for one victory for Russia, and then Syria only just happened in November, the end of October, that would have accounted for the other victory.
But why does it have to come through completely for Russia to win? The mere announcement in an information war causes a huge kerfuffle by itself.
Well, I know it causes a kerfuffle, but it wasn't a victory at that time. It's the same event, essentially, when you're looking at it. So I just always
So physically, it started happening last month in October, towards the end of the month.
With Syria.
Where America was leaving their post in Syria. Yeah.
Why can't it be like a deadly wound and then a death kind of thing? Because you make an announcement and everyone knows what's coming.
And just like when you look at the hearings, when you look at Fiona Hill's testimony, where just the mere things that are being said and what they're accomplishing, what is actually going on as a result of the things that have been said, and the damage that has been done just by things that have been actually doing. Okay.
Sister Maroney, are you wanting to say something? Are you okay?
Oh,
You didn't realize you're at.
So a comment from the class about the cherry picking. Somebody just pointed out that the cherry picking parts of this started to converge with some of Elder Parmender's studies, and he shared information and examples and proofs. So of cherry picking. So if we remember right from understanding the different things when you went into Daniel, I'm trying to think how when Daniel only goes from Alexander straight to the four generals, that the rest of it was all noise. And so she was using the comparison that that's what we're actually doing now. Some of it becomes noise and some of it becomes relevant. So so cherry picking, learning to cherry pick the particular points of history and the particular passages to put together to tell a story, to tell the narrative that goes through here. So we had Acts 27, the two ships, Pyrrhus and two histories, and Alpha and Omega. We also have Daniel 11:40, where you have two histories there. You have the kings of Epirus, the first king of Epirus, then the 10th past that was Pyrrhus. Then you have 10 kings. I think this was 10 years, I think. I can't remember if this one was 10 years. This was 10 leaders. So you have Stalin here at the beginning for World War II, and you have Putin here at the end, the history of the King of the South, two histories of the King of the South. Took those two histories and the two histories of Pyrrhus, the two histories of Stalin, cut them in half. So you have a history of Pyrrhus, a history of Pyrrhus, a history of Stalin, and a history of Stalin. This would be the first part, which is World War II, and actually later opened up to show what you have going on in World War I as well. But when it comes to the history of the King of the South, you've got the King of the North and the King of the South. You've got the history of World War II and then World War III. We next went into the battles of Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum to see how they overlaid into these histories, into each of these histories, giving us different details for each history. Understood the mode of warfare based on the elephants that were used in the with Pyrrhus, it was a new mode of warfare, and the new mode of warfare to apply to for the application of our time was information, using the internet, using a line of information and following this line and tracing the line of the history of the internet and how it's been used. In the history of the Sunday Law in 2014, we saw things that were taking place between 2012 to 2016 that were all part of leading up to this Sunday Law. You had the internal events, you had you have Cambridge Analytica coming in. You also have the message that came from Great Britain. Both messages came from Great Britain, one being Parminder, that there would be a Sunday Law. Then you also have the external that was taking place to bring in church and state. So the Battle of Ipsus, we learned there was an alliance, and that lined up with the invasion of Poland. Then you also had Ipsus and Heraclea, two applications for Ipsus, Antigonus and Demetrius, with Demetrius in alliance with Pyrrhus. You have Seleucus versus Antigonus, and Seleucus is in alliance with Ptolemy. So where do we go after that? After 2014, we started looking at 2019. And what brought us to 2019?
The revolutions.
So we went from discussing these battles in the history of World War II to looking at the message of time. The reason we're looking at time is because when we're looking at our past histories, we have this repeated reference to the 9th of November. This has been our latest work to connect what we're seeing about November 9 into these battles. What significance does that date hold? So 2014 took us to a midway point, and 2019 shows at the end of the midway point where we see the end of revolution or the end of civil war, as Sister Victoria said. We saw that through revolutions, and we saw that was a period from 2001 to 2019. We saw November 9 in the French Revolution. In the French Revolution was when Napoleon declared the end of the French Revolution and declared himself. Did he declare himself? He became a dictator. So we recognize the November 9 from the history of World War II and from 1989 as a recurring theme. It's been just in the last couple of studies that has really caused us to consider that date in history. What else did we find with the November 9? We went through a lot of those histories and how often it popped up in the revolutions, but also in reading, reflecting on the Time magazine article, Donald Trump and the 9th of November or November 9, I can't remember how it's titled, but how the secular world was also, was the ones that actually noted the parallels of November 9, but they were lining November 9 up with the setting up of the dictator with 2016. In one sense, that did show us that 2016, because the election was on November 9, 2016, but it wasn't the setting up of a dictator, though he is a dictator, always a dictator. But we saw it just as when it came to I want to say the German, was it German? Robert Blum, was that Germany? I have him confused in my mind as well. But we were able to line up Robert Blum and the death of Robert Blum as not the end of the revolution, but the time in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump, where it just became, the civil war became futile, that Donald Trump is in and you're going forward with this and there's no turning back now.
I think that was Germany, because I can't remember, but he died on
November 9,
9, right? 1848 or
1848, which is right before the loud cry, which is why it was placed at 2016, because it was 2 years before the loud cry. When is our loud cry? 2018. So 2 years before was 2016.
Whoa. The Lord is working on my memory.
Yeah. So we saw 214 as a midpoint, 2019, the revolutions, the setting up of a dictator. We also saw this was taking us to a message of time. So if we were to draw up our reform line, we want to consider where we are at in history. Based on these things we've studied, what are we overlaying with our reform line to explain it? So just to set up, and I kind of wanted to be tricky with this one, but I'm just not that good and it takes a lot of time to get these little pieces. Maybe somebody knows a better way to do it. So you're going to see the whole thing here all at once. But initially what you have is your 1989, 2001, 2014, 2016, 18, 19, 20, and then Panium. So Panium brings us all the way back, and we're at 2019 now, and we overlay our reform line to things that we've studied. So what happened around 2019? We know that revolution starts at 9/11 and it goes to 2019, and this is revolution 1. So in our revolution studies, we see we have, and if you remember the board work on the revolutions, you had a revolution,
And
then you had
counter revolution.
then the counter revolution. So revolution 1 is 2001 to 2019. And then there's a period of preparation and then a counter revolution. So let's see. So where do we place revelation 2 from 2020? And we're not sure where we mark its end. It may be at Panium. For now, we're just going to put it there. So you have this period of preparation here, and then you're going to have the counter revolution. The counter revolution, I still get myself confused on that when I think about it, because they're going to fight the dictator that was put in place, but isn't it the same people that we're fighting here? They're the same ones that we're fighting to keep him away. Is that correct? I still have confusion on that area.
Can you rephrase that? I kind of know what you mean, but I just need to hear it another way.
So from 2001 to 2019, what you have is the Democrat side fighting against this union of church and state and losing this battle, right? Until you finally get to 2016 and he's elected, and it's futile, this revolution. They've pretty much lost this revolution, but it continues on until 2019.
I thought we had the revolution the other way, that the revolution began in 2001 was the Republican Revolution. And then at 2019, you have 2019 to Panium, where you have that rest period, and then the counter revolution comes, and that's the Democrats, but they fail.
Thank you, because now it makes sense to me. I'm sorry, hey, I'm slow. No. I get it. So they were the ones that were fighting to put him on the throne. So yes, you do have, it is a revolution. It's still a revolution, but I had it backwards in my head. Thank you. That's like little bits and pieces clear up, because I've always been struggling with what this counter revolution was then.
Can you reiterate that? Sorry for my mind.
So what I was saying was wrong. What he's saying is that this, in 2001, after 9/11, they began this push to put church and state back together, right? So this is a revolution by the Republicans to put this church and state back together. And after 2019, you get Donald Trump elected, and it's all a go. It's going to happen. There's no stopping it now. 2019, Trump was a dictator. He's always a dictator, but he's less restrained as a dictator. You're going to have a period of preparation, and now they're going to fight back. I think what always confuses me, because they're all fighting here. It's civil war. They're all fighting. And I think that's probably why it confuses me.
The counter-revolution is right. Fighting to put to rid church and state, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we know that they're going to lose.
Fight back.
What?
Who's fighting back? The Democrats? Are the Democrats fighting back between 2020 and Panium, did you say? The revolution?
Counter-revolution.
It's a counter-revolution where they're going to try to counter what has occurred in the previous revolution.
But the counter revolution, does it start at 2020, the counter revolution? Oh,
that's where she's marking it based on, I don't want to go back a slide. I don't remember if I might have it in the slides later, where she marks it with the French, the second application of the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and I can't remember the German Revolution, but she shows the period of preparation. where you had that period, if you remember, I think it was the Russian Revolution, where you have the Spartacists, you had they're trying to take down there was different people vying for power. So there was this period of preparation, but then the counter-revolution started after that. And she was marking that, lining it up with 2020.
I thought it was, never mind, I don't want to put that in because I don't want to confuse, but the Civil Wars were also kind of like a revolution, right? Or no?
It is. She says that way back before here, that I think she says it way back in Arkansas, that she tried to find the difference between a Civil War and a revolution and found that they're interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
the Civil War is within, and it's between the two factions that are in, but it is the Republicans in 2001 that are on this battle to bring in church and state.
How does the impeachment fit into all of this? Because would that be the counter-revolution from 2020? Because we're going to be in 2020 in about a month and a half.
Well, the impeachment process is expected to finish before Christmas, I think I understood. But so I don't know how that fits in.
Yeah, the Republicans are trying to make the city hearings only 2 weeks long.
Yeah.
Which I mean, shorten it because Trump is so upset over this whole business.
So replace revolution using the French Revolution, German Revolution, Russian Revolution, and now where do we go? And we know that with the Russian Revolution, it was the Bolsheviks, right? French Revolution, it was the Jacobins. And with the German Revolution, that was the Kaiser, right? So so the Bolsheviks got Lenin in place, correct? The German Revolution, that put that guy Ebert in place. And the French Revolution was Robespierre and the Jacobins. I'm still trying to grasp some of this myself, so feel free to comment where I might be lame in what I say. So what is another concept to add to our lines? We can mark a dictatorship at 2019, and we can mark Napoleon or Lenin, or we'll just mark it dictator. So we saw Revolution 1, and we see the counter-revolution. We see also a dictatorship marked at 2019. Napoleon and Lenin are both placed there. What else can we put over this? We've done revolution. What other period of history are we in? What period we're in is World War III. And how do we overlay World War II on top of our line to demonstrate World War III? We see an alliance in 2014 between the King of the North and the King of the South. We saw that alliance as well between Hitler and Stalin. And then 2016, the first battle they fight together, and that would be the invasion of Poland. And what did that begin according to World Wars? It begins war on the Western Front. And the Western Front is where Donald Trump is fighting for against three allies to gain control of the three allies. Where do we begin and end it? We begin it in 2016 and end it at Panium, and the Eastern Front begins in 2019. And so this is World Wars. So war on the Western Front goes to Panium, and war on the Eastern Front begins at 2019. Where can we place, what can we say is placing us at war on the Eastern Front?
Sorry.
Well, wait, you hold that thought for just a second. Would this have anything to do with the impeachment process in Fiona Hill? Because war on the Eastern Front is going to be war outside of the United States, correct?
Yeah, this has been war on the Western Front.
Yeah, war on the Western Front, yes.
Because war on the Western Front is Trump against the government of the United States of America.
But the Eastern Front starts at 2019.
But that's still over there.
Right.
Yeah. Because the Western Front keeps going all the way to Panium.
Yeah, she's marking it at Panium.
Yeah.
And the Eastern Front. So what my question was, is what are we looking at as the Eastern Front?
It's going to be the same that it's been. Just,
right.
So it's just going to be Trump and Russia going back and forth over spheres of influence.
But do you think that it has that Fiona Hill testimony is going to have anything to do with? And I say that just because of the stuff that she said about, she's basically letting people know, look at what you've done.
Yeah, but that's just for the impeachment here. I don't think it has anything that's gonna happen to the people there. They already know. I don't see how Trump can lose spheres of influence over this. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you would have to, her testimony would have to make him lose spheres of influence for it to be an Eastern Front war,
Okay,
I think.
yeah, I still struggle when it comes to
It's
understanding war.
hard, yeah, it's hard to bring them all together.
But they are still battling over Ukraine, right? Ukraine is in the middle of all this.
They got their aid though. That was the problem there,
Yeah,
I thought. So this, all they're doing is this information war that's helping Trump either to win or to lose here. So I think it's hard to split them up because they get mangled together, all of them. Because Trump doesn't know how to stay in his own box. He just likes to make the world his playpen.
yeah.
He doesn't know. Like this, I wonder, based off of some of the testimony, it's like, did he even know what he was doing didn't make any sense and is illegal? Because it's almost like he didn't even know.
Well, I'm reading the book Anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
or not Anonymous, The Warning by Anonymous. I don't know if I want to say, but I mean, my thoughts on the man may have a certain amount of intelligence, but he has an awful lot of stupidity.
Yeah.
An awful lot of stupidity. And that's what which I already believe that anyways, but reading the book, it's like, that's what happens when you just, you have, as I think it was Brother Jonathan in one of the posts, maybe he put, I don't remember who put it, but I know my comment was that he has a high I problem. I, me. And there's a danger in that. And God has let it go to this point for a reason, because until people see it in black and white, they aren't going to believe it and they aren't going to hear.
That their Cyrus is actually Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, their Cyrus is actually Pharaoh. Yeah. And I'm always praying how to demonstrate that on Facebook to those that will hear. Do you know what I mean? How to demonstrate that in a way that people will hear it. Because I believe the Lord has to lead us how to, well, we're going to see that at the end of this study. So there's another concept, the last one we discussed before we discussed time. And what was this? Actually, when we were discussing 2014, we hadn't moved into 2019 yet. What was the concept that we added to our line? 2014 took us to what history? We went to 1863, to the Sunday Law, this union of church and state. Where do we mark that beginning in our history? We mark it at 9/11. The history of the Civil War, we mark the beginning at 9/11. Where do we end it? We ended at 2019. We can see it continue, but on that line, it takes us to 2019, and we start to see the subject of the Sunday Law, or rather what we could call church and state coming back together. And we saw that beginning, so that was the revolution. Thank you, John, for, sometimes it's the simplest thing that I finally click onto something when it comes to the revolution. But the revolution was to put church and state in place. So when we consider where we are in our reform line, we've nearly finished the end of a period of revolution. The government of the United States has been almost overturned and a dictator established. We're 3 years through the history of World War III, or a war on the Western Front. We're about to see the Eastern Front open up. And keep in mind that this was April. This particular presentation was April. When we discussed Heraclea, we saw that we could begin to trace that we traced Heraclea at least 3 to 6 months before the battle. We could already see the evidence that there was a battle forming. So very soon, and when we went through that history of Heraclea, we saw that though he's united or in alliance with Putin, and he stands before America and all the world and says that he believes Putin over his own intelligence agency, and then but at the same time, he's putting systems in place to block Russia and others from being able to meddle in elections. So we could already see the evidence of that battle that was forming. So very soon we should see the tension arise for the Eastern Front. And church and state has been the subject in the United States. It's taken a new life 18 years ago at 9/11. We've already seen our first Sunday law in 2014, and we're about to see another one in 2019. We can start building the narrative about what Sunday law looks like. We have a lot to consider about where we are in history. So 2019 is another step because it is the Sunday law actually for the Levites. Another step in the union of church and state. We're already making decisions, not just us, but the Levites and the Nethinims, that they're going to decide how do we pass 2019. So we need to consider these lines and where we are in history. When I think about myself in like coming in 2014 or into 2013, but think about the history that for us, what began, if you look at the plowing, if you look at the agricultural line, the plowing, I wasn't here in 1989. I don't think any of us were here in 1989 to 9/11. We were here, but we weren't in this, having anything to do with any of this. And so it makes me think about what they don't understand and what was plowing us and preparing us to be able to, for those of us that weren't even in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I mean, surely it was the work of the Lord, however he did it.
1989?
Yeah.
I wasn't even born yet.
Sorry. And you're 30 years old.
Huh?
And 29. You're 30 years old.
No, I'm 29.
No, you're 30 anyways.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a priest, you're 30.
Huh.
So somebody had a question because of the comment that she just made in this right here about 9/11. So I don't see how we see a Sunday law at 9/11 because I don't know if anybody caught that, but it sounded like she's placing the Sunday law at 9/11. She's just marking the beginning of the Civil War at 2001, although it wasn't stated here, but I think we remember from the lines that 1861 began the Civil War, and that began the whole thing of wanting to put "In God We Trust," find a phrase and put it on the coins. So it was the beginning of this union. So that it didn't see a Sunday law at 9/11. We're not saying 9/11 is a Sunday law because if we brought that to our reform line, we can't overlay a Sunday law at 9/11. Why did we begin this at 9/11? Because we went to the history of the Civil War and saw the union of church and state starting in 1861. And we also saw that in the 1950s. So we're seeing church and state. There's an agitation at 9/11, but there's an agitation before the Sunday law for it to become a subject that the people are calling for in 9/11, particularly was a catalyst for that. Did that make sense? Everybody follow that?
It's what turned all the evangelicals into radical evangelicals, pretty much, into by hook or by crook we're gonna take this. Steve Bannon had a strong effect by 9/11, and he helped.
Was he around then? Where was he at in 9/11?
He
You would know this probably better.
He was, I think, doing Breitbart by then, or starting to get involved in the media industry, because he had been like a filmmaker making documentaries before that. So then he started to get into the news.
Am I getting confused with him?
Steve Bannon?
Isn't he the one? Wasn't he not? He was with the liberals at first, right? Or was he always? Who am I getting confused with?
I don't know.
Remember, because later on he, after 9/11 happened, he just became like.
Steve Bannon was conservative before, but he was like not like, he was like nominal conservative, if I can say nominal conservative, but 9/11
that was him.
Trump was liberal before he became a conservative. He was liberal all the way up until like 2014. He was a Democrat.
Who, Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was
talking about Steve
Bannon. Like,
yeah. I was wondering if maybe she was confusing the two.
No, because you were talking about 9/11 turned him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember looking into his history, and he was kind of conservative because he was a Catholic his whole life, devout Catholic. So he wasn't like liberal or anything, but he wasn't crazy conservative either. But 9/11 happened, and that crisis sparked something in him that everything changed, and he was like, now he had a passion in life. He's like, we're gonna change America. We're not having this anymore. With 9/11 business, we're going to change America. And all his films started to to show 9/11 as this horrible attack on the American ideal system and how we can't let this happen, and destroying Islam and destroy Islam and destroy Islam, basically. So it radicalized Steve Bannon.
So the last subject we were discussing was 2019, and we haven't completed that study, but it's something that we can study as well on our own. We've taken a few dates to this already, and what are we taking? So looking at the dates that brought us to 2019. So we have the 220 that took us to 1799, right here in the French Revolution, and the setting up of the dictator Napoleon, which actually was also on November 9. So you have the 220 taking us to 2019. Next, we have the 126 here. It takes us to 1893, where we mark the Sunday Law and the Catholic Mirror in the Chicago World's Fair, taking us to 2019. In 1865, the Civil War. The Civil War ended, and based on 2014, we can take that to 2019. This one was not one of these prophetic numbers, if anybody remembers right. 1865 was the end point of the Civil War, whereas we know 2014 is a midpoint, but the end point here took us to 2019. Let's see, 1956 takes us to 2019. That was the 63. And we know that this, I think this is when Eisenhower, I think it's when they added the under God into the Pledge of Allegiance. I know that and the paper money was all in that history. I don't remember specifically which one, but it all was linked to, and it was also an endpoint linked to 2019, and it was linked by the 63. Somebody do them, yeah, the 63, that's right. Then the 245 takes us, and what is the 245? Does anybody remember what the 245 is?
Yes, half of
490.
Yeah.
It takes us to 1774. I guess I don't have the right date there. I put the 245 there. I guess you can understand what that's supposed to mean. It's supposed to be 1774 here in our building of the logic of the 245. And what do we set up? What was set up here was the First Continental Congress, the very beginning of independent government in the United States, taking us all the way to the very end. So that was supposed to say 1774 here. So we then had the 490, but we're gonna wait and discuss the 490 at the end and not just yet. We want to place one more that we discussed, 1989.
What's that picture there?
You'll see in just a minute. I'll tell you in a minute. It was hard because I couldn't make it big.
Okay.
I could have made it big in the slide, but I couldn't make it big in Publisher, and I didn't think about it in the slide. I could have made it bigger. So we discussed 1989 and the 30 years. What story are we building from this in 1989? From the line of Christ, we see a period of 12 and 18, telling us the story of the movement, and teaches us the birth at 1989 and the development and the growth and act of the priests in active labor and then public ministry, the stages of the development of the priesthood. And what is the subject of 1989? What happens in that year? That year you had the fall of the Berlin Wall. So yeah, I could have enlarged it on the slide, but I couldn't. So it's just a picture of the Berlin Wall.
Oh,
Is that-
wow.
It looks like an ocean.
I
side.
know it does. It looks like some kind of long naturey path, you know,
Yeah.
like some
That's
kind of
the
path
wall.
with flowers on the side or something.
That's the wall there.
You can't even see the graffiti.
Sorry. It is graffiti. That's
Yeah,
the colorful
I could
part.
see the graffiti like super close. Yeah.
Maybe when we go back to the out of the slideshow, I'll enlarge it for you guys. So you had to follow the Berlin Wall. So there's a wall that goes down, and what's happening with that wall, and what is it doing? That wall is splitting, there's a wall that's splitting a country, or in that case a city, and it goes down. At the beginning of our reform line, we have a wall, and that's the subject of 1989, this wall. And what is the subject now? We have the subject of a wall. We can take that a few different ways. There's a wall between church and state, and that wall is falling. We mark Sunday Law in 2019. We can see a wall come down. So 1989, you have a wall come down. In 2019, you have a wall come down.
Is that what you meant by the epitome of the Sunday? No, never mind. Sorry, different thing. I was going to use Sister Adriana, but that's different because the embodiment of the Antichrist is different from Sunday Law or something. I don't know. I was thinking something.
So we don't want to apply it literally, but sometimes it just opens up that way. It's not a coincidence that it's a wall that divided a country internally, and what's dividing the United States, the subject of a wall, might be on the Mexican border, but when we came to the Battle of Heraclea, it's just as much war on the Western Front as it was a conflict between the King of the North and the King of the South. The subject in that battle on the Western Front is a wall that's dividing a country, and that's something that's going to be a major subject this year as they fight over this wall. So that's Donald Trump and his wall in 2019. So we're going to finish on one more history, the 490. It takes us back to 1529 in the Diet of Spires. Diet. I always ask, and I just want to prefer to say it however you guys like it. Diet of Spires?
Yeah.
15, I never remember, so one day I should remember. But
Diet? You can.
1529.
Yeah, it's okay.
1529 is chapter 11 of the Great Controversy. It's the whole chapter, and it's worth reading when we're bringing it into our history.
Isn't that when Martin Luther was doing his? Oh.
Mm-hmm. In 1529, there was a meeting between the Protestant princes and the government and Catholic delegates. The German Protestant princes were called to this meeting, and the subject was the difficulties with the Ottoman Empire and the issue over their faith. And I think I need to go back because I know I've caught glimpses of it, but I want to look at this history a little bit more because you got Islam here at this time too. So I've known that, but I've never looked at that part of this, and I haven't heard it discussed a whole lot, but Islam is at 1529.
So you have church and state and Islam.
And Islam
just like
at the
we
same
have
time.
in our, wow.
Church and state and Islam at the same time.
This was during the second wall, isn't it?
What?
The second wall,
I think so.
1529 is after 1499.
So we'll paraphrase a little of the history. This meeting opened on the 15th of March. The Catholic representatives were there in force, and they had a lot of power. Charles V was the emperor, but he didn't come. He sent his brother Ferdinand, who was far less favorable to Protestantism than was his brother Charles. He condemned Protestantism and denied the that's supposed to be princes. I had to change that several times, but I missed a few probably. So he denied the princes their right to choose their own faith. At this stage, they were not named Protestants. It's the princes' response to this meeting that gave them the name Protestants because they protested the move to restrict their religious liberty. Yeah, when I do voice type, it picked up princes as princess every single time. So those who had accepted the message of Luther and Zwingli, those princes met together and they came to a unanimous decision and said, let us reject this decree. In matters of conscience, the majority did not decide. The majority does not decide. Ellen White, through chapter 11, discusses this. The princes said, a thus saith the Lord cannot be set aside for a thus saith the church or a thus saith the state. So you see a coming together of Charles' brother Ferdinand, who's enforcing the will of the religious majority, and the princes protest this decree, which gives them the name Protestant. So 1529 is the Diet of Spires, where they are first called Protestants, and it's the 490 that takes us there. In the 490, where do we know the 490 from?
From this
The
70 weeks.
70
weeks. And would be the close of 70 times 7. Is that how he says it? 70 times 7?
Yeah, it has to be
490.
70 times 7 because that's 490.
And it would be the shut door for the Jewish nation, right? This is the beginning of Protestantism under its name. So the Reformation had begun, but now they're being called Protestants. She says that if this decree was enforced, the cause of the Reformation would be damaged because what they were fighting for was against liberty of speech. She says they were reestablishing the Roman hierarchy, and if they reestablished the Roman hierarchy, it would bring back the ancient abuse of that power, and it would destroy the work of the Reformation. The work of the Reformation had already been damaged by fanaticism and splitting from the inside. The decree, if not protested, would finish the work of ending the Reformation. So in 1529, there's a meeting, and what's coming together is church and state. They're reestablishing a Roman hierarchy. The Protestants, the Protestant princes, not yet named Protestant, launched a protest and said that the government cannot enforce the will of the majority. The government is not there to protect. The government is there to protect the minority. So 1529, they're first called Protestants. And the Protestants would get their name because they are protesting the union of church and state, right? So one subject when we discussed the Sunday laws, 1863 and all the way through the history of A.T. Jones and his writing of the American Sentinel, then we considered the 50s and we come to our time, 2001 and forward, and what was happening. What was happening in 2001. What can we learn from 1529 that teaches us about 2019 and what's happening in the United States? So what was happening in 2001? Yeah, 9/11. And we've been discussing it already anyways.
Church and state.
Right, the revolution. Thank you for John for making it so simple for my complicated mind. So you have the coming together with church, state coming together with church, and what are they doing? Protestantism began in 1529, and there's a protest. And what is Protestantism doing in our history? Who is coming together? The government and the Protestants are coming together. So just like in this history, they're setting up a Romish state. Liberty of speech was under threat. She says they're reestablishing the same hierarchy that Rome had. At the beginning, it's Protestantism that protests. In our history, it's the Protestants that are setting up the Romish hierarchy. And who are they using? They're using Donald Trump. They begin the beginning of the protest to the end where they set it up themselves. So they protest here in the beginning, and it's themselves, the Protestants themselves, that are setting it up at the end. So considering what we've studied this semester, particularly our last studies, we traced this rise of dictatorship, the coming together of church and state, not just in the United States. This might have been just for the Brazilian class. Brazil has their very own, and if you liked him, what he stood for, you realize that you're in danger. So if you're in the United States and you like Donald Trump, and now you realize what he's about, you're in danger. Because he does not become bad in the future. He stood for church and state when he was elected. But we've gone through these histories. You know, I don't know, just a thought. Does Donald Trump really even care about the union of church and state? I don't know that he cares about anything but Donald Trump. And it was whatever would put him in that position. Is that wrong to say?
No.
It's so true.
Do you think he really cared?
He doesn't care about anything but himself.
Whoever is gonna call him out.
And that's why he went from being a Democrat and being what's the other one, the non-party affiliation, independent, thank you. He bounced until he found what got him there. I don't think he cares about church and state or anything but Donald Trump.
The guy who's had how many wives and has been like abusing them, and he doesn't care.
Is it fair to say also that, like, when you look in the Dark Ages, the church used the state to fulfill its will, and now it's like the reverse. You have the state or Trump using the church to do his will.
No, because he wouldn't have gotten there without the church.
But that's what I'm saying. He's using them to do his will, not their will. So it's like the reverse of the papacy, because the papacy was the church that was leading, but in this case, it's the state. It's Trump.
He has to do their will, and if he doesn't, he loses power. That's the problem, is that the church is using him to do their will, because every law he passes is what the church wants. And when he passes something like Syria, he has to bounce back because they get mad at him. So they're the ones controlling him through Fox.
But there is a difference, because in the Dark Ages, it was the church that was leading, and Trump isn't the church. So we do have a reverse there at the very least, that it was the church leading the state, and in this case we have,
In
I don't
the
know.
ages, the state was the one who was doing all the physical punishing and the laws and everything, and it was being pushed by the church. I'm not sure what you mean.
The papacy was the leader of that entire time, and he was the leader of the church. But we don't have a leader of the church directing this movement right now. It's the leader of the state.
They're the ones that put him there.
Wait, no, wait. What do you mean the papacy was in charge? Because they had, if you look at the history, practically speaking, there were ups and downs, and there were times where the papacy and the state weren't completely together, but they would put their differences aside to go after heretics.
When we're looking at it prophetically, it was the papacy. The whole 538 to 1260, it had nothing to do with those ups and downs. It had everything to do with the papacy using the state to do its will. So all I'm saying is that in this case here, we have Trump essentially using the voters to do his will, using the Christians to do his will. They're not telling him, like he's bringing laws and everything, but it's like you were just saying, it's for his motive. He doesn't care about the church state. But
Trump is just their puppet, if that's safe to say.
Yeah.
They just used him to, the revolution was for the union of church and state. They just had to find the right person that would create the situation that would finish their work. And he was their tool to do it.
Okay.
I think. But I mean, it seems pretty clear that he didn't care anything about church and state.
Sister Jackie says the base voting is only 30%. That is the evangelical base. Popular vote he won was from the majority of Republicans, not only Christians.
So he doesn't become bad in the future. He stood for church and state.
Wait, but the Republicans and the evangelicals combined forces. That's part of the church state thing. That was what all of moral majority was about. That's the whole point of that. And what's the other one? The one in our time, Project Blitz. Their whole point is to combine with the Republican side of things to be able to have these influences. So
we've gone through these histories and we've seen what's coming together in the United States from 2001, escalating in 2014, introduced in 2016 is this church and state relationship. We've seen that under Trump and this enforcing of morality on the people. This is to me, God has really designed it to be capable of people to be able to see that you would want to unite church and state and put in office. And he was described by a couple of articles I read as amoral. I think I talked about that before. I had to look that up. Amoral means you have no morality. You don't have good or bad. You just have none. And so we see that under Trump and his enforcing morality on the people. So these people, some of them, I wonder if some of them aren't going to wake up at some point in time, or are they going to only wake up when it's too late? And I mean, there's got to be some hearts. This is hardening hearts. You go back to Egypt, and I was trying to find some of that information, but I couldn't find exactly what I wanted. But when you had Moses coming in and saying, "Let my people go," and the plagues start to fall, there were Egyptians that chose to side with God.
Yeah.
He said, "You got to stop doing that." So you had this going on with Trump, and let my people go, let my people go. And so here you are today with his immorality or amoral, and yet, do you think there's going to be some Christians that are God's people that are actually going to wake up and see there's got to be some
Christians?
I'm praying that some.
Yeah.
In the Republican side.
Yeah, there's Republicans who don't like Trump, and there's Christians. You
got to see that something's wrong with
well,
this.
there's a split in the Republican Party, and there's a split in Protestantism and evangelicals, because they already have a shift. They also have a shift in their whole Christianity between liberal and conservative. The liberals are wanting women ordination and acceptance of gays and everything, and they're pushing away from that because there's a huge split.
The fractal of every faction. In every
I know, it drives me nuts to think about.
Like, wow, I wonder why Ezekiel saw wheels within wheels and
Yeah.
like chaos.
Yeah, but I can even say this too, is that even some of those who are, Republicans that are Christians or that are even just Republicans. A lot of them resigned from their position. They would rather resign than to stick
And you
and
know-
stand for Donald Trump. We were talking about this in prayer meeting.
And
Yeah.
because think about it, that it has to be a sacrifice, right? Coming to Christ is there. I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but there has to be a Christian. You have to make sacrifices. And so for those Republicans that are wanting to stand and defend to protect the Republican Party, the institution of the Republicans, right? They're feeling their hands are tied. They're going to have to make a sacrifice as well. They're going to have to make a sacrifice if they're going to stand for what is right. It's going to cost them. It's going to cost everyone to make the right choice. And it's a question of whether or not you're going to pay that cost, if you're going to count the cost and pay it. So this is not something that is just regarding us or the Sabbath, this union of church and state. It's not just about us. As we care about our freedoms and we start being tested on whether or not we care about others as well, even if we don't agree with their choices. They're not fighting Saturday Sabbath. They're just bringing the nation back to God, to morality. Who's going to protest that? Because the Protestants aren't. What have we been doing this semester that fulfills 1529? What are we to be doing this year? Where are the princes? Is there no one this year to protest? There are some princes in Congress protesting, but it's not talking about the princes of 1529. This is the new movement, and this is meant to be us. So who's meant to be protesting? This is what we've been discussing when we go back to these histories of A.T. Jones, what happened in the 50s under Eisenhower and what began to happen under George Bush. It's where we see this reintroduction of In God We Trust, and the president starts to override the authority of the United States, which leads to 2019, where the work is coming to completion of the uniting of church and state. So in the Diet of Fires, you had the Protestants. They're first called Protestants there because they're protesting this union against the Catholic leaders and the government. They're protesting, and you have this. They're trying to bring in this union of church and state. And here you have the Protestants who are the ones that are putting this union back together. They're not protesting. It is us that is to do this protesting. Our job function. And what really amazes me in going through all this, I think it had to be providential. I know it was all along, but even for more reasons now, that we went through the Brazil classes. So during the week, we've been keeping up with current stuff, but the Lord had us on these classes. For me, what it really benefited me is what we're learning. Like, for instance, I think I brought this up last week sometime. When we learned in Canada, when was Canada? Maybe somebody remembers. June? Was it June? When we learned about the Sunday law not being a Sunday law.
Yeah, that came out before, though, I think, before Alberta.
Correct, because here you are, we've been going through these classes, and she did the presentations in God We Trust in these presentations. It was always there. This union of church and state instead of Sunday law was always there, which is, you know, it's like, it's humbling to me that, you know, we were all somewhat surprised that there's no Sunday law. And that took a lot of people out. And I think that the bulk of us here in our study group, online and here personally, we just thought, wow, that makes total sense. Why did it make total sense? But then when I go back through these older presentations, it was already being said. So it makes me start looking at things different about things that are being said now. Because, and I think it was Adriana that somebody brought it up, that there are things that are being said now that we're not getting.
Yeah, I agree.
Think about that. Because a bunch of this was already there.
But I wonder if we are, like, is there a time that we're able to see it? Because nobody saw it. And it was, like you're saying, it's right there. It's plain as day. You know, if we're looking for that stuff, are we going to be able to find it before it was meant to be found? Or I don't know.
It's not even that. It was out in the public arena.
That's what I mean. But for some reason, no one saw it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So why did no one see it? Were we not meant to see it until after? It seemed like, for me, like, I just when I realized we were doing the revolution studies in Lillooet there a little while ago, and that's when we kind of realized, we're like, man, they were talking about this stuff before we even heard about it in June.
Yeah.
And we're wondering why we why we didn't see it.
Yeah.
It was supposed to shame us from our foolishness.
Oh, that's what I feel like. That's what I feel like. It shows me my dependence on God, that if you can put the message out there and I don't even get it, and you've put it out there clearly and I didn't get it, I need to have my dependence on God, because it showed me my own ignorance, inability to, right? And what were we doing during all that time? Were we not studying? Were we not praying, Lord, open up our eyes, help us to see?
We were looking at external events and saying, see how they're limiting religious liberty? It's the time of the end.
And it kind of takes us back to the Sabbath school with Peter and being in that, what you call it, the jail, he was in the jail, and then the light was there, right?
It was there.
Yeah, but
he didn't see it until it touched him.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
So there's a call to protest, and what are we called to protest? Gay marriage? Is that what we're meant to be protesting? Or morality? Church and state is what we're called to protest. When we see church and state come together, it's not just Christianity. We can see church and state come together. They're not attacking the Sabbath. They're saying a Muslim woman shouldn't be in Congress. We are a Christian nation. We don't want these people, and we need to bring the nation back to God and into our politics and into our schools. It looks different than in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 1860s, 70s, and 80s. But if we don't protest it, if we don't see the danger in that and protest it, we're failing in the work we've been raised to do. And this is worldwide. It's India, Brazil, it's spreading worldwide. It's begun by the same religious elements that helped Trump into power. So if we start protesting, we're right on time. And I think at this point somebody asked a question, but she talked about that we're way too late in recognizing this because we had major mistakes. Think about it. Why didn't we know about 2014? 2014 was understood in 2012. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know that the leadership denied the message. We didn't know anything about it. We're just crippled and crawling our way along, trying to keep up and understand what the message is. So we're late in recognizing it because of major mistakes. When we see 2001 and we see New Orleans and we think it's judgment on immorality, and we come to 2016 and stood on the wrong side. So when she's bringing up New Orleans, she's talking about, was that Katrina? Was that Hurricane Katrina? 2001, and then also New Orleans, the Hurricane Katrina. When we're saying that it's judgment on our immorality, this nation is, I was there too. That was my mindset, that God is punishing this nation for our immorality, and that we need to turn to God without even realizing what that meant. I don't know if, that's my ignorance. I don't know if anybody else would confess that ignorance, but that was my ignorance.
That's what we all used to agree on Bible study.
So so let's see. So then we come to 2016 and we stood on the wrong side. If we'd understood 2014 at the time of the union of church and state, but I see God's mercy when you really think about it, and I don't have a line here to show it on here, but when you look at 2014 as the Sunday law, what happens between 2014 and 2019? If you think about the waymarks that are in between. What are they? You have 2014, when we went through this a lot, you have Sunday law, loud cry, close of probation, right? So we went through our Sunday law asleep and on the wrong side of the issue. But God looks on the heart, right? And he's going to continue to go forth with the message. And his people will hear his voice. So we get past 2014, we don't even know what's going on. We get to 2016, we still don't know what's going on. We know there's going to be the last president, but we're still on the wrong side of not even being able to figure out that last president would be on the conservative Republican side. So then when people warn us about the Brazilian president, we think that that's fanaticism because he's necessary. We are late to recognize it, but to protest it, we're on time. It needs to be a subject. If we don't protest it, we fail. We have to complete the work of the princes. We're not here to protest against Muslims or gay marriage or immorality or socialists. We're here to protest against the introduction of religion into politics. So what does protesting look like? And do we write letters to Congress? Our work is to protest it in our classes, to our brethren, when we see Facebook posts and people are sharing things about how bad America is because they're immoral, and how it's bad because there's Muslim communities that don't become as American as we want them to. We need to protest to each other and speak of it from our classes. First of all, recognize it for ourselves. Correct our wrong thinking.
Amen.
We're not going to be standing in Congress anytime soon. Our first work is for the church, and for the most part, we see Adventists caught up in this. What is this waymark for them? 2019. It's their Sunday law. So if we have friends that we want to be Levites, you realize that this year they pass or fail their Sunday law. Are we warning them? We might not be able to say this is your Sunday law test, but how careful should our language be? Do we justify Trump? What damage does that do to them in their Sunday law test?
Right. Sister Christine is asking, is the protest of the church and state the same as the loud cry?
It's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what did it for us.
Because the cry is you're fighting against whatever law is implemented in that time period. We always thought it was the Sunday law that you're protesting against.
And it's the image of the beast
Yeah.
that
So
is before.
whatever they're using, to push against your conscience, to make you go against your conscience, that's the thing that you're protesting against, to be enforced against your conscience. Mom?
We have to remember that the loud cry is a formalized message that we haven't yet received our full increase of knowledge on as well.
What are you saying, Mom?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is, because we're calling it midnight cry, but it's the loud cry.
This is the Sunday law. It's the Union of Church and State.
Right.
And so if the image of the beast is our test before the close of probation, the image of the beast is not Sunday law.
Nope.
The image of the beast was the union of church and state.
True.
And so it's the image of the beast as well for the Levites, and it's the image of the beast as well for the Nethinims. So we've covered a lot of history. We've discussed the King of the South and who is the main subject of the Midnight Cry message. Most of our studies come from the perspective of the King of the North, and we have much to learn about the King of the South. We've been able to see battles, revolutions, and if there's anything we want to leave with, it's understanding what's happening right now. Not just with Putin and Trump, but this call to protest, to change our thinking. Because there's 3 parts to the Midnight Cry message. Thought it was really fitting that she ended the class with this. The first one is easy. It's the date, November 9. The second part, hang on one second. The second part is what that looks like, and what that looks like, and that's where we see World War II, 2 fronts, 4 battles, information war, connecting our thread. And the third part of that message is a call to change our thinking. A call out of our Protestant way of thinking, because for the most part, the individuals of this movement were not on the right side of this issue in 2016. We have to identify what history we're in, how that impacts not just us, but how this history goes into our 2 other lines, the Levites and the Nethinims. This isn't just a shut door for another group. It's 9/11, and another group, it's Sunday law. And we also have a responsibility to represent this message to them, at least by our language and our perspective and influence, if we can stand like the Protestant princes.
Amen. And then one last thing, Sister Christine, she says, then the Levites and Nethinims are hearing the loud cry already.
Let me go back here.
It depends what time part of their dispensation they're in is.
I ran into my own struggling thoughts here, and maybe it's because the wheels within wheels. And it is because there's all these different things happening at once, internal and external, 2 groups on the internal. right? And then you have the external, then you have the big line. So you have a fractal within a fractal within a fractal within a fractal going on all this time. So, and then all the different aspects of it. So the Levites, this is their Sunday law. And this is what I ran into last night or yesterday when I was finishing putting this together. Because if Sunday law is Raphia 2019, then Sunday law was Panium. And I had to go back through some older presentations to try to see how that was, because we have Sunday law here. Am I mistaking something, or is this the part that goes for, help me out here, because Sunday law is a close of probation. Yeah, so this is COP.
Sunday law at Panium?
Huh?
How did you get Sunday law at
Well,
Panium?
and I went back through some old classes to see, and they do put it here, Sunday law, because because if this is close of probation for them, and then their harvest, right?
Panium is the Sunday law for the Nethinim. The Sunday law you have written there is just the literal Sunday law that goes up the line of the 144.
Sunday law for the Nethinims is the big Sunday law, not Panium.
Well, then
You got to go back and look at the other ones, because that's what was confusing me as well. Because if this is close of probation, because we
It's
have
not close of probation for the Nethinims.
it is.
but if we have close of probation at 2019 and we're in our harvest, right? They have close of probation at Panium, and this is how do I say that?
No, they have Sunday law at Panium.
On the wrong one, because I was thinking of us. I was thinking of us in here, so that's why I goofed up. So we're in our harvest, right? So they have their close of probation. This is Sunday law, like we had a 2014 Sunday law.
Yeah.
And this is the close of probation, and that's their harvest.
That's their second advent. Yeah.
So
why doesn't she never place it on the fractals?
she does. I've seen it, because I had to go back through some old classes.
Well,
and
why
I saw
isn't
it.
she consistent about it? Why does it?
This is like Jonathan said, it's the big close of probation, but it's
No,
at
it's the big-
close
it's
of
the big Sunday
probation.
law. You're using the wrong term because you're calling the Sunday law the close of probation, the actual Sunday law.
But it is their close of probation.
Yeah, but okay, so the Sunday law that you have written on the Nethinim line there, that's not their Sunday law. That's just the literal Sunday law of the 144,000.
This is their Sunday law.
Yes, that is their
They
Sunday
get their
law.
loud cry, then they get their close of probation, then they get their harvest.
Yeah, you're right. I have the fractal down here, and that's right.
But it still really confuses me. Then what is this? Is this for the 144,000 only? Because that is the line, that's the line for the 144,000, right?
What do you mean? Is that for the 144,000 only? What, the harvest?
This is their close of probation and their harvest, and then that's the final shut door.
Okay, so when the priest line ends at Panium, we jump down into the Levite line, and then we go through another harvest. So no, one line up to the Levite line. So we go through their harvest, and we're harvested again, and then we jump down and we go through their harvest again. So everyone is harvested at that time. The thing is, the priests go through 3 different harvests. So that last harvest is the final harvest.
Yeah. So that kind of threw me. I had to really sit and think about it the other night when I was working on it. So Sunday law is, Panium is their Sunday law that brings them to a close probation, that brings them then to their harvest, and the harvest is progressive.
And remember, you went over the study the other day about the 5 binding offs?
Yes.
And because that's where I think I got it from, was where
Binding off. This part of this is copied from that study, that there's a binding off. I don't have all of it on this board, but there is a binding off that we're in right now. There's a binding off here. So this is a binding off, this is a binding off, this is a binding off, this is a binding off. And then she also put a binding off after the second advent during the 1,000 years. So 5 binding offs is what she put. When you said harvest 3 places, I had to stop and think about that, but I forgot I had that on there still. So any comments or thoughts or questions?
I have a question, and it's pertaining to what's on the line here on this last, I think it's the slide before on revolution. And what's the time frame for that? It shows it here is between 2020 and Panium. Is that correct?
This one?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. This is where you have the revolution beginning at 9/11 to be done with Democrats and get church and state. So this battle has been ensuing up to 2019. That's the end of the revolution. There's a period here of preparation, and this comes from both the second application of the French Revolution as well as the Russian and I think the German Revolution, where there's a period of preparation and then there's a counter-revolution. And the counter-revolution is to go against the one that just got established here. But they lose. They will lose. Donald Trump will win.
What was your question, Jackie?
Yeah, I said, where does that, I was looking at the second revolution, but the first one began on this line on this slide in 2001. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the one that begins in Revolution 2 is after 2020.
It begins in 2020.
Yeah.
So in between November 9th and 2020, we're in that preparation period, and then whatever point in 2020 that second revolution starts, it goes all the way to Panium.
And there's a lot being said about the upcoming election, that a lot is going to involve the upcoming election, the 2020 election here.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, so
you didn't say if you were asking where does it end. I know she said at that point in time she doesn't know where it ends, but she put it at least up to Panium.
Mm-hmm.
Panium, are we still? I'm still confused every time I think about it. Are we mark Panium in 2021, right?
Yeah.
2021, yeah.
Because I was just thinking in regards to the election where the Democrats lose, the inauguration is in 2021.
Yes.
But the election is in 2020.
So that election could be involving the revolution going on at that time too.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure if you see what's going on with the Democratic nominees, their whole push is through that nominee we have to bring down Trump. Our whole goal with this election, with all these nominees, is we got to find the right man for the job to bring down Trump, the guy who was put in. Because the first revolution was to bring the counter-revolution is to bring him out, and the only way to do that is one through impeachment, but that's going to be done this year, so it's part of something else. The other way is through the Democratic candidate through the 2020 election. So that's their counter-revolution. And there's this huge cultural change and hullabaloo and like big banning behind the candidate like there was with the Republican Party and evangelicals behind Trump. The same thing Democrats are going to do now behind the Democratic candidate, whoever it's going to be. Like AOC with Bernie Sanders and all that, I think is going to be part of it.
The thing is, the problem is with the Democrats, the reason why they're going to lose is the same reason they lost the last time, is they didn't band together, and they had too many different things going on, because they had the Bernie group and they had the Clinton group. And Obama just came out yesterday, I think he made a statement. He said, listen, like, the differences between us are way more minor than the differences between us and Trump. So we have to band together. We have to get it together before this election, because if we're split up the way that we are, when we come to that election, we're going to lose again.
Yeah, exactly. I was watching the last Democratic debate, and I'm like, why are they at each other's throats like this? They shouldn't be acting like that at this point. I know it's a debate, but it was like attacking at some points, and I'm like, what's the point of that right now? Don't you have a bigger goal?
They should be coming together to save their party.
Yeah.
Exactly. They should be saving, not just saving the party, but it's saving the U.S. Like, they should be realizing that all these candidates, they still have it in mind. It's the same mistake, that I want to be the president. So no matter if I have to cut the throat of the person next to me, I'm going to do it. But at this point, they have to realize that they can't afford it. The nation can't afford it.
Do what the Republican Party did and get all behind the one candidate that has the strength to do it.
Yeah, but they can't decide on who that should be. That's the problem. So
what Adriana pointed out too, and then we'll close it on that, was that Buttigieg, is that how you say his name? Buttigieg. That he seems to be jumping up there in the polls, so that we're probably going to be tested on homosexuality.
It has to be based off of our lines. If you had race, gender, and homosexuality, and you had race and gender and Obama and Clinton, then the third one has to come in.
So But let's close in prayer and then we'll break for. Adriana, do you want to pray?
Yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for how much has been put together for us in our lives and in our understanding. We thank you for showing us our path and how we've traveled through all this time and how we had things wrong, but how you saved us from those incorrect understandings. We thank you for what you pulled us out of, Lord, and we ask that you continue to help us see the things that we still don't see right now at this moment. Help us to continue on the same straight and narrow path and not to fall off no matter what the temptation is on either side. Lord, we thank you for everyone who's able to come fellowship today. We thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the warm, loving care that everyone has and how we're all coming together and drawing near as the test becomes more and more intense. We also ask a blessing on the food. Bless the hands that prepared the food for everyone wherever they are and help it to strengthen and nourish our bodies and get us through the rest of this day. Thank you, Lord, so much for all that you do for us. We pray this in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.